Welcome back to the TMDSAS podcast. This is your host, Enrique Hasso, the coordinator of Research, Advising Services, and Digital Media at the Texas Health Education Service in Austin, Texas. Today we are rounding out the roadmap to professional school with our seniors episode with Mr. Fernando Vasquez from the Texas A&M College of Medicine. Mr. Vasquez explores how you should prepare for the interviews as a senior, how you should rank your schools based off of what you're seeing during your interview day and your interactions with the schools, the overall admissions timeline, what an interview day looks like for applicants, and most importantly, what the admissions committees are looking for in applicants during the interview day. We'll also explore at which point you should start considering Plan B and what you can do to prepare if you see yourself in a position to have to reapply. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. Mr. Vasquez, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
All right. Well, for those of our listeners who aren't familiar with you or have interacted with you, could you tell us a little bit about your background real quick?
Yes, with pleasure. I grew up in California, specifically Southern California, Los Angeles area. So I went to school there and high school and all that good stuff. I attended college there at Cal State Long Beach. It's a public state school, and I received a Bachelor of Science in Occupational Studies and Transitional Services. And then after that, I was working at Kaiser Permanente right after I received my bachelor's, and was doing some outreach with kids who were interested in a healthcare career. Mm-hmm. And I got involved with working with underserved areas, specifically Watts and Compton, which are historically the worst neighborhoods in LA. Yeah. And I did that for a couple of years, inspiring kids to pursue a career in some type of healthcare profession. And one day, one of my advisors came up to me and said, "Hey, you should go get your master's." And I said, "Maybe, yeah, sure." And I went to a fair, one of those recruitment fairs, and after that, I ended up going to one of the schools for a visit, which was Michigan State University in Michigan, of all places, and ended up taking the offer of admissions, and I completed my 2-year master's degree in higher education administration from Michigan State University, and right after that, landed a job at TCU here in Texas in student development in the student affairs division. Mm-hmm. So I was there for a couple of years, and after that, I went off to back to California. I was missing my family. I wanted to get back to see them, and ended up being hired at my first medical school job, which was at the Stanford School of Medicine in their Office of Admissions and Diversity. But prior to that, I did a 1-year assistantship at Michigan State in the admissions office. That's how I got started with admissions as a possible career, because no one growing up is thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be an admissions officer when I." That's like the last thing on my mind. Right. I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to go up and be an admissions officer." Okay, not really. But because of my assistantship during my graduate school years, I was able to do 1 year at the undergraduate level and really liked it. And once this job became open at Stanford, which I thought was a long shot, but I ended up being hired, and I was there for a couple of years. And then after that, ended up at UCLA, UC Riverside Medical School program, and made our way back to Texas because my wife is a UT graduate, so she wanted to come back to Texas. And I ended up getting a job over here in Fort Worth at the UNT Health Science Center, Texas College of Osteopathic Medicine, TCOM. And so I was there for over 5 years as assistant director of admissions, and been working since then with the TMDSAS schools and JAMP. I was a JAMP coordinator there, medical school coordinator, and the position was open here at Texas A&M, and it was a great opportunity for me to work in a very dynamic, very driven and highly innovative school that I thought was a great opportunity for me to come and work at a school of this caliber. And I took the position in 2016, and I've been here over almost 2.5 years. So I'm happy that I'm now director of admissions and also director of the early insurance programs.
Awesome.
So that's my journey. That's my journey from the West Coast.
Awesome. Well, we're very glad to have you, and you bring a lot of experience that's kind of varied, but it's going to be very meaningful with a lot of our listeners, especially with your journey, not just in Texas but outside of Texas.
Right.
All right. So for our seniors out there, pretty much the big thing that they're thinking about is preparing for the interviews. Can you give us some tips on what to do in this point of the application process?
We'd love to. Yes, sir. Yes, this is a real critical part of the process. The interview is considered one element that is reviewed at the end when the admissions committee comes together to take into account not only the application, but the essays, the activities, all the metrics, and the non-cognitive metrics. So this is the end point of the process where the applicant comes in and fully demonstrates and exhibits their last 4 years of activities. If they are a typical undergrad, they're non-traditional, it'll be a little different. But this is an opportunity for the applicant to really showcase in person what is motivating them to pursue this career. Because on paper, we see a lot of great attributes, great activities, superstars. And when the interview comes around, we want to see this applicant in its real form, as far as can they articulate some of the things they were involved with. How much passion do they have? Because you can't really read that on the application. You can by the amount of activities that they've done, but the passion, the enthusiasm, the fire in their belly as to why this is their career of choice, that's hard to really gauge from the application. And therefore, what's different from other professional schools is that the med school requires this face-to-face interaction. Mm-hmm. And what applicants sometimes confuse, Enrique, is that they think it's just they're just performing under that interview time slot. So here, for example, they have 2 interview time slots, and they're thinking, I just have to perform during those 30 minutes of each of those interviews, and that's it, and then I can lay down my guard. But what happens is you are under evaluation, and I don't want to scare everybody, but you're being evaluated from the day you check, from the moment you check in to the moment you leave. So it's a holistic, comprehensive evaluation of the applicant and their presentation of themselves in a formal and in an informal setting. And how do you prepare? Well, and you mentioned in your podcast, I think podcast number 34, which was called Planning Your Next Steps, Preparing Your Marketing Campaign. It's an excellent podcast. I would recommend everyone hear that one, because you hit upon a lot of the points that we want applicants to be thinking about. But the main thing is they need to practice interviewing with others that they trust, others that they can give them constructive criticism. Mm-hmm. But the delivery of the message is important, because a lot of applicants, what happens is they start to practice in a way where they sound way too rehearsed and way too scripted. And you ask a question and the answer is like pre-planned, pre-scripted, and they can't veer off that in any fashion or form. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like they didn't answer most of the question because they just went off and said what they had memorized. And that's okay, but not that you're listening. You're not listening to the question, so you stick to your prescribed message. So practicing in a more relaxed way with people that you can trust. And I know advisors are busy, faculty are busy, but most people that you hang around with can sit there and hopefully see if you are looking relaxed. You're not. I have these 2, what I call M&Rs. Avoid your M&Rs, mumbling and rambling. A lot of that mumble, blah, 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 and I don't understand what they're saying. And then they ramble, keep going and going and going and going. And I'm like, okay, I'm lost. I'm officially lost. So avoid the M&Rs because that's definitely going to be problematic.
Awesome. That's some really great advice. And I think you really hit on an important point where you can't sound too rehearsed, at which point in the application process it sounds like you're not a very genuine person. And that is
Exactly.
pretty much the last thing you want to convey in an interview.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much for that feedback. As far as kind of going beyond the interview, just the 2 time slots that you mentioned, what should an applicant be doing to kind of prepare to rank each one of the schools in anticipation for the TMDSAS match?
Right, and for those that have interviewed, and of course they're going to have an insight. So you may have read about the school online through other various propaganda, handouts, informational booklets, things like that. But when you're here, you're at the campus, you're having a real, true feel of the campus environment, the students, their attitude, the faculty. Well, you're looking for feel. You're looking, does it feel comfortable? Will I have the support? Will people know me and my name when I'm here? Or am I just another student? And do people seem to really care about my success? And do they have the services that I will need eventually if I will need, say, academic or counseling or something like that? Because med school is going to be stressful. It's going to be stressful. I can't sugarcoat that. But you got to start to know, is the school going in the direction I would like to go? Can I jump on board with that? Like, we have 3 priorities. We have rural health, military health, and engineering medicine. Can I jump on board with those priorities that the school is going with? Does that resonate with me? Does the mission that the presenters talked about, or the mission that I read on the website, resonate with me? Because our mission is to improve the well-being of the people of Texas.
Right.
So you're committing yourself to doing that for the people of Texas. Is this school going to get me there? So when you start to think of, reflect on the school that's going to help you succeed in achieving your goals of becoming a caring, compassionate doctor for the people of Texas. So once you figure out which school is going to make you feel the most comfortable and the most compassionate place for you to have the assistance you need, because as I mentioned, it's going to be stressful, but you're needing to know, will this school here help me get through the ups and downs and the roller coaster ride of medical school? And that's important, because if you know the mission and you believe in the mission, every day that you come to school, you're going to be striving towards that goal, that common goal that we all have here. I think understanding the deeply embedded mission of the school by the visit that you have is going to tell you how you rank the school.
Awesome advice. And
it comes right after your experience of interviewing is going to give you a lot of insight that you probably would not get otherwise.
Yeah, that's some phenomenal advice. And there are just so many things to take into consideration, but I think the golden nugget that you just gave is that you have to believe in the mission of the school that you're interviewing at, that you want to rank higher. That's gold. Yeah. Because
coming every day to school, you're riding along with that mission, and your every day of learning is meaningful versus being a task.
Yeah. That's huge. All right. Well, kind of riding the coattails of that awesome point in kind of preparing for the next step after the interviews and the application process is just kind of sitting and playing the waiting game and waiting for those offers of acceptance.
This is the tough part. This is probably the toughest part of the process, and maybe the toughest part of anything you're going to experience. It's because of the process. It's just so drawn out. Yeah. You could have applied in May 1st, and not received an interview till August 1st. Yeah. And because there's some traffic rules that we all adhere to through TMDSAS, you won't find out as early as November 15th. So that's a wait. Most people don't wait that long for job interviews. So it's a different experience than what you're used to as far as I'll know in 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
Well, here you won't know for 2 or 3 months. So definitely different. So one key attribute that we look for, and I look for during the interview process, because I also interview applicants every Thursday. I'm assigned 3 to 4 candidates, and I interview them. And I look for those that can exhibit patience. When something doesn't go your way, how patient are you? And are you willing to delay your gratification for the sake of others? So one thing that is key to this profession is being patient.
Yeah.
And so what we expect these applicants to know is that this is not a quick turnaround process. And so what they should be doing during this time, because they've listed a lot of things that they are planning on doing under the plan activities. I'm going to do this and this and this. And I ask them when I interview, are you doing X, Y, Z? That will keep you busy. That will keep you going. Because if you're doing healthcare activities, keep doing them. Research, service. Those things cannot stop because you interviewed. You can't be like, I'm done, call it a day. I got my interview. Let me sit back and go to the pool and wait for the call, right?
Right, no way.
It's you got to continue, and it's a continuum up to the point that you enter med school, because we're going to want to see that you continue to do this. So the key during this point is to continue to build your resume, build your interactions with people, and keep building your hunger for this passion of yours to go to med school. And it can't be that you are trying to rush the process. And one thing I discourage applicants to not do, here's the don'ts. Do not email myself or others that are in this position to the admissions office and say, I'm really interested. They're called letters of intent or emails of intent, and they think that's going to sway us to either offer them a seat at our school. Those emails cannot be considered. Once we interview you, once we've seen you, once the committee has deliberated, nothing else can be interjected into the process. And also, please do not ask your letter writers or other people that support you to call in and call on your behalf as to swaying us to possibly offering you a seat in our med school. So those two things are not recommended. Like I said, key attribute is patience. Yeah. You will hear from us. Eventually, you will hear, because we follow the TMDSAS traffic rules. That if the earliest for end state is November 15th, and then we can also notify you as late as December 31st, which I don't know many people that work on December 31st, so that might not happen. and if you don't hear then there's the match, which is for February 1st, and if you don't hear then we have what I call post-match activities, which are after match, and you can still hear from a med school up to June 1st. So, or some schools, when I used to work at TCOM, we notified some applicants a week or a few days before the school started. So you just it's a never give up mentality with the process until you actually have a physical letter or an email saying that for this year you were not offered a spot at the med school. So it's a waiting game. It's a sheer just grinding it out. But what should keep you busy are the things that you listed on your application that you're continuing to do. So that should not stop.
Yeah, and I do want to point out that from November 15th through December 31st is the time period where the schools can offer pre-match offers.
Right.
And so what that means is that the school is essentially saying, if you rank us high enough in the TMDSAS ranking during the match, we'll rank you high as well, so we have a better chance of matching.
Right, and I believe you have a whole podcast on that, right, on the match.
Oh, goodness, there's so many resources out there. We'll definitely link to several of them. I think the key one that you want to look at as an applicant is the TMDSAS match video, where we actually ran a sample match for an applicant that had several pre-match offers, and they interviewed at several different schools, and it was kind of working through how they would go into a match, into the TMDSAS match, and how to kind of work that in your favor.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. So let me share with you some other things that applicants who are waiting to hear should be thinking about as possible Plan B. You have to have a Plan B, because we do also ask applicants, if you're not accepted this year, what would you do to improve your application, or what steps would you take? So at this point, if you haven't not heard from a school, or you're still waiting to hear from a school or something like that, so it's after the match, right? And so you should start considering maybe a post-bac option. Maybe your MCAT or GPA was not as high as other competitive applicants, so that's something you should start to look into. Maybe a graduate school options should be another consideration, and maybe employment options in some kind of healthcare employment opportunity. Maybe your healthcare activities were not as robust. You had some, but maybe you didn't come across very insightful, very knowledgeable, or your motivation was still in question. It could be that was not as robust as others. For example, our M1 students this year, the average healthcare activities for the average sitting student right now is close to 1,000 hours.
Wow.
Of care activities, and the average service hours for the sitting students right now is a little bit over 500 hours. So that tells you that students are doing a lot, and if you want to be considered competitive, not only academically, metric-wise, but there's the other set of activities that are important to us, which is like service and healthcare. And so that's just the average. So you should be continuing to do these things. And the other thing is to call some of the schools. Some schools offer file reviews where someone like myself or an associate dean of admissions will sit down and give you some feedback, strengths, weaknesses, and suggestions as to a game plan for the reapplication cycle. And we also offer reapplicant workshops. They're either here physically on, you show up, we have them here on a Saturday, and I started doing the virtual reapplicant workshops last year via the web. So those students that cannot come to the actual workshop, we do them virtual reapp workshops too. So that's something that is offered to them at no cost, free. They just have to sign up. But so within this time frame, if you haven't matched, there could be some things going on that maybe didn't elevate your application to the top of the list, because then there's a list that's generated for those that don't know, but we ranked the applicants from top to. We interviewed this past year. This year we're shooting for about 650 applicants. So if you're number 650, your chances are pretty low, right, to offer a seat. So you should start thinking and contemplating options. So there's a lot of things to be done while you're waiting, not just simply waiting to hear from a school. But again, you have to know, how strong and how competitive you are compared to the current class that was admitted, and that should tell you a lot about your chances of being admitted. But it's difficult, it's stressful, but it's not over.
Definitely. And I think that kind of gauging how competitive you are is actually one of the key areas that a health professions advisor can help with. You're going through the process and you're not hearing anything, and it's January. Maybe talking to your health professions advisor about starting the Plan B ideas that you shared might be a good point. And also, I've kind of experienced that whenever somebody's kind of falling into that category where they will have to reapply, those applicants have a really good idea of what it is that they need to do to improve their application. So, take a couple of minutes, look at your application, and I guarantee that if you're in that situation, you know exactly what it is that you need to do.
Well,
those file review opportunities are really key, and we'll definitely be sharing more information about those in the spring as we see them come through.
yeah, one of the things that also can diminish the percentage of the student being accepted is their performance on the interview. I think you've had speakers in the past on your podcast who have mentioned, yeah, you can be great on paper, you know, MCAT 520, GPA 3.9, 4.0, super, you know, that's someone that can do the work. But then you get to the interview and either you blow it, you're unprepared, don't know much about the school, you don't point out any of the things that you really, you know, enjoy about the school or that resonate with you. You can come across arrogant, can be unprofessional, can make comments that are inappropriate. So a lot of things can go wrong, and you may end up on the other side of the list because your performance. So the performance not only on your application is important, but the performance when it comes to your delivery of yourself. And you hit a home run on the podcast 34. That's when I listen to that, I'm like, that's it right there. You're giving them the keys to a successful interview day, because remember, it's not an interview moment. I guess what I want to clarify here, Enrique, is not an interview moment, it's an interview day. Yep. And a lot of applicants at the end of the day, because like, for example, our interview day starts at 8 o'clock. Our interview with our faculty and other administrators start at 2 o'clock. So you've been here almost 6 hours before you get into that interview mode, and your endurance and your enthusiasm and your energy is tested. And some applicants get to the interview and are just wiped out by the time they interview. It's not by design, it's just we have a lot to show you, a lot for you to see. And so sometimes the scale gets swayed to the side where no, this applicant just wasn't ready. Maturity is another big one. Another thing that ails a lot of the applicants is their maturity. They sound immature, or they sound very shallow in their answers. They can't really describe what this career that they're trying. It's hard to believe that they've gone through 4 years and they get to the interview and are unable to fully describe their motivation in a compelling way. So it's shocking to see that they come to this point, and you see everything done diligently, correct, and then they get to the interview. It's like they've never interviewed in their life.
Mm-hmm. There's no substance behind the numbers.
Exactly, that's it. And so that could derail a competitive applicant, because you were saying you're sitting there wondering what happened, what are my strengths are good, my application looks good, my activities look good, all of that looks good, and then you still receive a rejection letter. Mm-hmm. So that's something that shocks a lot of the applicants when they call for some feedback, and we just let them know that, you know, their performance didn't quite meet the expectation and their entire interview day performance. And so then they work on those things. So it's the people interactive skills that I think you mentioned in the past that are really key here, because you're going to interact with strangers, people you've never met. Right. And you're going to exhibit that while you're here. And we're going to look at those things from the moment that you check in.
Yeah, and I do want to point out that, you know, on interview day, you're not just interacting with the dean of admissions or people from the admissions office. You're
exactly.
Your tour guides that are current students,
staff, admission staff,
the staff, you know, speakers during the introductions. You know, you're in an auditorium and you kind of glaze over during one of the presentations. It's very easy to pick you out.
And I recall last season there was an applicant that fell asleep during one of our presentations.
Oh my God.
It was a presentation by our associate dean of admissions.
Wow.
So guess what happened to his application, right?
Exactly.
So it definitely, we know that some people are traveling, they're coming in early, but the rule of thumb is get some rest, prepare yourself, and think of it, this is a serious next step for me to exhibit and showcase my motivation. But yeah, we had someone that just fell asleep. The associate dean wrote the name and went to deliberations the next day, and we've not seen him in our class ever since.
Yeah, I mean, the interview is your time to shine.
Yeah, and so you have to be on from 8 to 5.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I'm sure we could talk about this topic for several
Another
episodes.
podcast for itself.
a whole other podcast. Yeah.
Yes, sir. See, another idea to get to number 100.
Right. Yeah. Well, we're definitely going to revisit this, and hopefully you'll be available to kind of continue to engage with this topic, because I mean, clearly there are a lot of things that can go right, but there are just so many things that can go wrong. And I think it's very valuable for the students to go in with a mentality that's, during the interview, that's essentially what you've been preparing for. You want the schools to meet you, and you want to put your best foot forward in that situation.
Right. And pick up the things that resonate with you about the school, because the schools and the interviewers may want to know, so what did you like about the school now that you're here? And hopefully you've jotted down 3 to 4 or 5 things that quickly come to mind that you can share with the interviewers. Oh, I liked, the campus culture. I like the curriculum. I like the community partners that I'm going to be trained at. Yeah. Many, many things. I can't tell you what you're going to see, but definitely you should be picking up on those things while you're here, because you're also interviewing us as much as we're interviewing you. And I think it's a collaborative effort here. It has to work for you as much as it has to work for us. But we're trying to show you our best, and we do that every Thursday for 20 weeks. And whether you're the first one that we interview on the first interview date, which this year was July 19th, or you're the last the last interview date, which is December 13th. We've had people who have been admitted, even though they were interviewed on the last day. So it's never over. That's the attitude to have here. It's never over. And if you do receive a rejection letter or email, you can always build off what you've already done and make a stronger case for the next cycle. So it's just a matter of commitment, dedication, and your drive to become a future physician.
Exactly. Jumping off of that point, I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about financial aid and scholarships, and what applicants should be doing as seniors to prepare for, figuring out how they're going to pay for medical school.
Well, good question. And luckily, I've worked at other schools around the country, and I also now know that there's many different tuition for different schools, private or public. So knowing that we're a public institution, tuition is going to be a lot lower. And so that could be your number one thing to consider is tuition, somewhere where I'm okay with incurring that debt, because it's going to be times 4. So if it's going to be $200,000, $150,000, $100,000, that has to be a determining factor from the get-go. I'm going to have this debt. So does the school offer specific scholarships? I would say yes and no. Yes, because there are some donors and there are some hospitals that give us specific scholarships for students, for example, that are going into primary care or rural medicine or military medicine. So we're getting donations and donors that want for us to support students who have that priority in their foresight. And so we match those students that are wanting to go back to a rural area, to say a small town, or practice in primary care. So we'll allocate 5. We have 5 full ride scholarships at the moment, but we have about 20 to 25, ranging from $1,000 to $25,000 a year. But that's not many. We have a class size of 125, so that's not everybody. there are other avenues to seek. Once you're in med school, you can always apply to specific organizations that offer students scholarship. Yes, you would have to write an essay and maybe submit your current academic performance at the med school. So after your first year, you could apply for say a 10,000 scholarship or a 15,000 scholarship to the many professional organizations that exist. So it's not over, when you get to med school, you can still continue to apply for scholarships. The other pathway, and I call it the hidden pathway, is our military medicine scholarships, the Health Professional Scholarship Program through the Army, Navy, and Air Force. They offer those that want to serve and also want to possibly give back to the country and have their medical school paid for. All you have to do is gain admissions into a med school and apply to the scholarship as soon as you have an offer. And the benefits are immense. They pay for all your tuition. They provide you a $20,000 sign-on bonus, $20,000. And after that, you get a stipend, a living stipend of about $2,500 a month. Wow. So when you graduate from med school, your debt load is zero. So that's one way to consider if you wish to go in the route of not having this debt load under your belt. But scholarships are not prevalent in med school because some schools don't have the resources to provide every student. But for example, our tuition is very low. It's probably one of the lowest in the country. So you're already receiving a discount from the taxpayers of Texas coming to our school. Tuition normally is in the 50s, almost anywhere else. And so that could be a detriment to people who wish to pursue this career. But coming to a public medical school, you're going to be paying a lot less than most private schools. But you have to investigate what each school offers as far as scholarships. I can't speak for everybody, but we have about 20 to 25 scholarships that we offer incoming students, and others seek sources outside our med school to supplement their costs. And the other thing is to start saving. Saving is not a bad idea, right? And the last thing I would say, that I've talked to some pre-meds, you can start a GoFundMe account for med school because that's where you're going to do. And instead of them giving you gifts for your birthday, for Christmas, say, hey, I'm going to go to med school, pitch in for my med school expenses. Mm-hmm. And some people have done that to help maybe provide them some resources for their entry into med school. But scholarships are available, but they're not, prevalent across all the med schools, because again, here in Texas, if you come to a school in Texas, the tuition is already, it's probably one of the lowest in the country.
Definitely. That's some really great advice. And I know a lot of people may not have even considered the military scholarships. And I think those are a really viable pathway for a lot of folks who may not have found a clear way to fund their education. I think that's a phenomenal opportunity. And I've had several folks who pursue that pathway, and it allows them to do the two things that they wanted to do the most, which was help people through medicine and serve our country. And I think it's a really amazing opportunity.
Most people don't know about it or shy away from it, but if they can look into it, they'll see that it's very different from what they think about when it comes to serving in the military.
Mm-hmm. Jumping on to our next point, I kind of wanted to do this as kind of in a rapid fire way.
Okay.
And so it's I know you mentioned earlier about correspondence after the application, but I know that you mentioned letters of intent, but there are several others that pop up here and there in those message boards. And so I wanted to kind of get a rapid fire response from you according to different methods of correspondence after the application comes through.
Sure.
All right, so here we go. We're definitely going to test you on this one.
Okay.
So you did mention that letters of intent. How are those perceived?
They're not.
Yeah, and so I do want to kind of add that little asterisk that this is for Texas A&M College of Medicine. I know some other schools might actually want them, but you'll definitely want to check in before sending?
Yeah, I say because they're just not. They can't be factored into the process anymore.
Absolutely. Plus, your letter of intent should be your application.
Exactly, that's what it is.
Yeah. All right. So,
we already have that. Yes. Yeah. Check, done. Yes, we have it.
Yeah. This year, it seems to be that emails saying that you're going to be in the area, and if you want to schedule an interview because the applicant's in the area, that you should do it during that time. What do you think on those?
Not during the admission cycle.
Yeah.
They have to be scheduled January through June of the non-admission cycle. Yes.
Perfect. And then the last one that we wanted to ask is thank you notes.
I prefer myself email thank you notes, but we have traditional faculty members who like the handwritten note, but definitely they should be done, whether it's email or via a card that you send to the school. But you should not dismiss this step because it shows your professionalism, your gratitude, and that you're being gracious about the opportunity.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think we hit all of our major points.
Oh, wow. Great.
Yeah, before we let you go, was there anything else that you wanted to share that our seniors who are applying to medical school, or perhaps you might have some advice for some of the dental and veterinary applicants out there as well?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. During this time frame, it can be a very volatile time where things are changing, and you're really nervous about your opportunities or your options to go to med school. The thing about this process is it's a continuum. It's never over, because if you're on this path to going to med school, whether it's this year or next year or the following year, you're building every year. You're building yourself towards being the most competitive applicant. So some are ready and some are not. So what you need to see is it's a personal development career track. This year, I'm not as strong, but next year I will, or the following year. So it's a never give up process. And if your mission is to become a doctor, you're going to take that attitude that we like to see, which is people that don't give up when things are not going their way. We want to see resiliency. We want to see motivation and a drive for this career. So this process is just a test to your will of doing something that you really want to be part of. And sometimes it's going to be easy. Sometimes it's going to be more treacherous. But with advising, with support from your family, and seeking out assistance from admissions people like myself, we're going to help you get there. So if you can see yourself reaching out to others around your circle, that's going to be key, because this is not an individual process.
Right. It's important to keep that network going.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. You're going to need it now and beyond.
All right, Mr. Vasquez, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing all this really amazing advice for our seniors.
Well, it was my pleasure, and I wish all these seniors the best of luck, and I look forward to seeing you at my med school in the near future.
Great. Mr. Vasquez brought up some excellent points about the interview day. Don't forget that your interview is not a performance day. You're under evaluation from the moment you check in till the moment you leave. This is a formal and informal setting, and you have to prove to the school on that day that you are an applicant who will promote their mission and their values. Mr. Vasquez mentioned Episode 34, Planning Your Next Steps and Preparing Your Marketing Campaign, which covers how you can align the messaging of your application to the mission and goals of each school. In ranking your schools, look for the feel that is the most comfortable and will provide you the support that you need as a student. Think about whether or not you can jump on board with a school's priorities, their missions, and their values. As far as admissions timeline goes, admissions offers will begin going out to out-of-state students starting on October 15th, and pre-match offers for medical Texas applicants will begin going out from October 15th through December 31st. Check out the application timeline on the TMDSAS website for more dates. In an interview setting, Mr. Vasquez mentions that he's looking for what he calls delayed gratification, which is explored in following up with planned activities in what you entered in your application. Are you continuing these activities through matriculation, or are you just looking to fluff up your resume? Don't forget that each interviewer is going to have a different set of priorities in what they explore. Anything that you've listed on your application is fair game for discussion. In finding out whether or not you have to reapply in the next application cycle, figure out why it was that you couldn't move ahead. Was it MCAT score? Was it GPA? Was it your activities? Mr. Vasquez mentions that for the applicants that came to Texas A&M College of Medicine, students had almost 1,000 hours of healthcare activities and almost 500 hours of community service on average. Don't forget that there are reapplicant workshops that the schools offer directly. And if you'd like more information on whether or not to figure out if reapplying is for you, listen to episode 36, Thinking About Reapplying Start Here with Dr. Deb Beck, where we cover what you should do to reflect on your current application and how to tackle the most common problem areas for reapplicants. Continue the conversation in our online communities on Facebook. The TMDSAS Hub is open to all applicants, and the TMDSAS Non-Traditional Students group is open to all non-traditional students. These groups offer you an opportunity to interact with your peers, advisors, and admissions committee members, as well as TMDSAS staff to address your questions. The TMDSAS podcast is a proud affiliate of the MedEd Media Network, your source for informational, inspirational, and motivational pre-med podcasts and more. Check out some of the other podcasts like the Pre-Med Years. Dr. Ryan Gray explores different aspects of the application process, such as on session 335, rebounding from too low MCAT scores to gain an acceptance. On behalf of everyone here at TMDSAS, we'd like to wish all our applicants all the best of luck during this application cycle. That's it for today. We'll talk to you later.